We're gonna cover how you can train for football, and we're gonna start right now. I'm Olympic strength coach Dane Miller. I've coached at 2 Olympics and over a dozen world championships, and I've gotten over a dozen Power 5 football players to that next level, from high school to the collegiate level, and I've even coached 2 guys in the NFL. So when we're thinking about football, some of the lenses that we have to think through are high speed, taking on a large amount of force when you're making contact with an opponent, making sure that we can cut as rapidly as possible, making sure that we're staying healthy throughout the season. So right off the bat, when we're thinking about training for football and programming specifically, I like to look at what are those benchmarks. So if we have benchmarks and I have a player that comes in, I'm gonna think about a novice player, an intermediate player, and an advanced player. And the main thing that we like to do right off the bat is look at 3 to 6 benchmark lifts. So if we're thinking about benchmark lifts, first, a clean or power clean, okay? How heavy can they clean? How heavy can they power clean? And then how does that show us what level that they're at? The second key benchmark, now we're gonna look at back squats, full range of motion back squats ideally, or worst case scenario, just below 90 degrees, okay? How strong are they? And also, how strong are they relative to their position? So if we have a running back, we've got to compare it to running backs. If we've got an offensive lineman, we got to compare those results to offensive linemen. That next area, now we're going to get into locomotion. Okay, so we're thinking about the 40-yard dash. We have to start to look at benchmarks in the 40-yard dash. How fast is a wide receiver compared to other wide receivers? How fast is an offensive lineman, again, compared to other O linemen? How fast is a D lineman, a linebacker? And we can start to look at those benchmarks. Then we can look at the next 3, and that's where we're going to look at something like a bench press, a broad jump or a vertical jump, and then finally we're going to look at the 20-yard shuttle. So we're going to look at the 5-10-5 shuttle. Those are the key metrics that we want to use to build our program off of. That's what we do inside of Peak Strength. Now, when we build out a program, how can we make a split or a workout split specifically for a novice or an intermediate athlete who's a football player that, let's say they're in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, versus, let's say we have a football player that's a Power 5 football player, or somebody who's a D2 football player, or somebody who's prepping for a combine or a pro day, okay? So we're gonna see a little bit difference between their training split. So we're gonna go deep into that now that we've established those benchmarks and how that week layout will look so that you guys can optimize your overall training. Okay, so when we're looking at that novice or intermediate football player, the first thing that I like to do is set up this assessment week. So we're gonna have an assessment week that we're gonna test them on, right? And during that assessment week, we'll test them here on the lower body strength day. Okay, so we can test them on, let's say, a back squat or a clean. Then the next day we can go in and we say, all right, what's their 40? Okay, let's test their 40. Sometimes, depending on the athlete, we might move the speed testing to day 1 and the lower body testing to day 2, depending on the athlete. We're gonna make sure that we're getting in the right amount of lower body mobility. After we go through those first 2 days, we're gonna probably take a day off. There's gonna be some time for this individual in the off season to have a rest day. And that's the other big factor that we have inside of Peak Strength, is that we're establishing those benchmark lifts. We have an assessment week. Then we can differentiate between the off-season training and the in-season training, because that's gonna have a difference with volume, with intensity, with frequency in the weight room. Now, day 3 in the weight room would be an impulse day. So now we're gonna look at things like a vertical jump, a broad jump, things that are happening very quickly that will transfer to their ability to jump, let's say for a ball or to block a ball, or even for their first step off the line if we're talking about linemen. And then finally on day 4, if there's any lagging tests, let's say we missed their bench press, or we wanna just see how many pull-ups they can get, things like that, we'll test that on day 4. But when we start to lay out that novice or intermediate actual workout split. So when we look at this, we're gonna see day 1 for an intermediate or a novice athlete is going to be leg day. Okay, day 2, upper body strength day. Then they'll probably have a rest day. Day 3, that's where we're gonna get into that big explosive work, some jumps, anything along those lines. Day 4, we might do speed work depending upon their 40, depending upon their shuttle. We might do some hypertrophy work depending upon, is their back squat pathetic? Is their bench press really bad? Are they a little bit smaller and they have to gain weight? That's the benefit of benchmark work, especially at the novice and intermediate level. And the reason why we like to front end more strength work is that a lot of younger athletes, let's say 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade, will make tremendous gains as an athlete just by squatting more, just by cleaning more, just by doing more jumps. Once they get to an elite level with those numbers, that's when we have to transition to the advanced training of a football split. Now we're gonna go into that advanced program and what that looks like, and we're gonna show you that exact template that you can use to build out your program. And then we're even gonna mine deeper into the actual days so you guys can see how to lay out those specific days. Okay, so when we get the advanced football player, let's say we have a junior, they wanna go play D2 football, they wanna try to get D1 AA, they wanna go try to play Power 5, something like that. We've got to start to look at those benchmarks. Is their squat good? In their position, let's say we have an O lineman, he's squatting 440, 450. He's got a pretty good freaking back squat, right? He's benching 315 for a set of 5. He's got a pretty good bench. A vertical jump's 30. He's pretty explosive. Maybe we could improve that a little bit more. We can start to look at those numbers and realize, let's look at a 40 for, let's say, the D tackle, and he's running a 5.140. Okay, well, let's try to get that below 5 flat. Let's try to get this kid who weighs 275, 280 to run like a 4.9 flat. Then we know he's going to have the physicality to get to that next level. In that advanced template, okay, we're gonna start with day 1 being a speed workout. Okay, so we want to really dial in their speed, so their locomotion. Now we're going to start to build out what that looks like, okay? And when I think about building a speed program, typically what we're going to do is, and you can see in here, we're going to have an actual specific warm-up. After we have that general warm-up, then we're going to do some technical warming up, okay? So now we're going to get into, let's do some pogo hops, let's do some dowel rod A skips to really dial in their movement pattern, help them feel better. Then we're gonna look at the actual speed work. So in this case, we've got sled sprints here on day 1. So this could be, we're looking at the 40 for this D lineman. His acceleration isn't as high as it could be. Let's get some weighted sled sprints. We'll establish that inside of peak strength. He gets those weighted sled sprints done. We make sure that we have the right rest period based off of what we're doing inside of our strength training at peak strength. And ideally, you guys would be in here, you'd be using peak strength, you'd be selecting football, and then that you want to train like a lineman if we're talking about the D lineman. Or if you're a wide receiver, you would select it. You want to train like a wide receiver. And when you get through these advanced phases or the intermediate phases, you're going to get this exact split. Okay, so here, now we're looking at his acceleration is lacking. Let's do some resisted sprint work. And then let's back end this speed session with some type of DTC work. So some type of dynamic trunk control or some type of hop work, like easy, low intensity hop work. And in this case, you can see we go dowel rod B skips, which is a little bit of a technical thing and also a little bit of a trunk control thing with reverse crunches. So now we're actually trying to fatigue the core, fatigue the trunk a little bit, but then do a little bit more DTC work to back end this entire workout. So what that split for the week would look like then is we're gonna do that speed work on day 1. We're gonna do upper body work on day 2. We're gonna do leg work on day 3. We would take a day off for recovery, and then we would come back and do another leg day that would incorporate change of direction and impulse work. So this is some real twitchy work. This is some real athletic based work. Remember, when we're training a novice or an intermediate athlete, it's easier to make strength gains. It's easier to help them improve on the field through confidence and through simple movement patterns. Back squat more, clean more, bench more, back squat more, clean more, bench more. It's easy. Once we get to that advanced level, we've got to do more locomotion. We've got to do some more speed and twitchy work, some more elastic work. And then finally, if the athlete is lacking some type of size or they have an area where they're more prone to injury, I recommend adding a 5th day of hypertrophy work where we just dial in and focus on some specific issues. And that's actually going to help with their recovery. It's going to help increase those lagging areas. And the way I would set up this upper body work, okay, so what I like to show you here inside peak strength, we're going to go warm up, okay, another general warm up. This is going to be consistent. It's a consistent general warm up everybody's got to follow. Okay, then we get into the actual workout. On an upper body day, I like to start off with some technical coordination. That's going to help wake everything up. It's a potentiator. It's going to help get the nervous system going. We don't need to go crazy heavy. In this case, we've got a power snatch. Maybe it's a power clean. It's a lighter, hang clean, something like that. Then they're going to get into that bench press or incline bench, something along those lines. We need to build that upper body for good strength, for good posting up on individuals, throwing stiff arms, grabbing, pummeling, anything along those lines. Then we might get into, and this is earlier in the season, earlier in the off season here. So there's a lot more volume, okay? Again, we're talking about off season training. We're gonna get into some specific accessories and then finishing that with some bodybuilding work here. Okay, so that's how that's laid out. We go through the weeks. Now, I'm gonna show you how that lower body strength day is gonna be laid out, because remember, we've got to go through the beginning to the end. Big key factor for training for football. Establish the benchmarks. We did that in the beginning. The entire system is built off those benchmarks, and those benchmarks are established from what those tests have been showing for the last 20 years with athletes, okay? With athletes in that specific sport of football, in that specific position. And if we can look at most D1 athletes get here, most D2 athletes do this, most D3 athletes do this, most high school varsity starters do this, most kids that go from junior high to JV do this. So we have an idea where those benchmarks are, so we can then quantify the work for the individual. Then we go into identifying, are they novice or intermediate, or are they advanced? Then once we identify that, now we can go into what that weekly split looks like. We provided the weekly split for the intermediate athletes. Now we provided that weekly split for the advanced athletes, and now we're getting into showing you what the speed day looks like, how it's built out, showing you how the upper body day looks like when it's built out, and then finally here, that lower body day. They're gonna do the general warm-up, okay? Then we're gonna get into another technical coordination layout where we've got, let's say, a power clean, a hang clean, a two-box clean, whatever that looks like. We wanna make this as strong and as explosive as possible. Let's take Nicholas Singleton. He trained here at Garage Strength since he was in 6th grade. He's right now projected to be a 2nd or a 3rd round draft pick. He's a starting running back at Penn State. He could clean 365 pounds when he was in high school. Okay, that's a clear benchmark for us. We can use that to get the next kid to become him, ideally, right? So we can say, hey, we gotta increase your clean. So that's gonna be that technical coordination, and that's gonna be the first exercise, the main exercise inside of our leg strength day. The next thing, back squats, okay? Using the Nick example. Nick back squatted 480 for like a set of 5 when he was in high school. So his back squat in high school was close to 530. Okay, he just recently at Penn State did 575 for a set of 5. Okay, those are benchmarks that we can work towards. And then we've got some type of accessory work for lower back, for hamstrings. We start to build our accessories around problem areas for that athlete. Is it hip work? Is it ankle work? Is it hamstring work? Is it glute work? Whatever that might be, that's where that falls into line. And then finally, I'm gonna give you guys this last specific day, which is going to be our impulse day. So when we're laying out that impulse day, now we're gonna do some type of technical coordination movement. Let's say a power snatch, let's say it could be a trap bar jump, could be a dumbbell snatch potentially. We're gonna move weight fast, really fast. Okay, then we're gonna do some easy hops. So unilateral hop, bilateral hop. That could be a pogo hop, could be a single leg pogo hop. It could be easy box jumps with almost no bend in your knee when you land. So like just boom, boom, really, really reactive. Then the next section, we'll get into intense jumps, bilateral jumps, unilateral jumps. So let's say single leg bounds with bilateral broad to a hurdle hop, something along those lines. And then we might finish with bilateral stair jumps, something like that. That's how that impulse day would be laid out. This is exactly how you guys can train specifically for football. You've got to identify, are you a novice or an intermediate, and be real. Then you can see, am I advanced? Then you can lay out that weekly split. And then inside of each day in that weekly split, now you know how that workout is built out so that you guys can take your play to the next level. That's exactly what we do inside of our strength training app, Peak Strength. Head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength, select the position that you want to train for inside of the football programs. It's going to look at everything. It's going to ask you to fill out your questionnaire, and it's going to help guide you into the right training system, into the right training program, so that you guys can achieve the highest level of football that you can actually get to. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.